Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest Thought Leadership episode. And I'm delighted to be joined today with Modwenna Rees-Mogg. Modwenna is someone who is an absolutely inspirational entrepreneur, has done many, many things in her career. I'm so looking forward to hearing a little bit more about it today and sharing it with you all. Modwenna, good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning. It's very nice to be here. What an honour.
That's very kind of you. So without further ado, we're just going to kick straight into it and ask our first question. So can you tell us a bit about how you first got into the water sector and what really drew you to it?
Well, to be honest, I'm a very recent entrant because I've realised there's an awful lot of opportunity where I have some background and experience where I might be able to add value, particularly to the entrepreneurial part of your market. I was originally involved in the last few years around construction and transport, and my investor friends in construction and transport said, why don't you look at the water industry? Because we're all in the water industry too. And the opportunities, indeed some of the challenges around innovation and entrepreneurship may have some very similar profiles to those entrepreneurs and innovators in construction and transport. And hopefully you'll nod and say, yes, that's true. Otherwise, maybe we should stop the interview now.
Well, that's certainly my background, Modwenna. So before I was at RSC, I spent nearly 20 years with Galliford Try doing construction engineering and all manner of things around water before sort of throwing my proverbial career hat into the ring and being a water specialist for many years now. So there is absolutely a huge intersection there, I guess.
Yes, good.
So, taking that, you've built your career, on that sort of nexus between capital and entrepreneurship, and you talked there about the opportunity. What is it about the water sector today that it makes you particularly compelling investment opportunity for you?
Do you know what? It's because an awful lot of investors are looking in the other direction. They're all running after AI and this and that and tells them which. But am I allowed to tell you a little story? I'm afraid
tell away.
It's based on the construction sector, but I'm certain the clever people hopefully listening to this will be able to correlate. So imagine a situation where there's a man on site and he's got a pneumatic drill. I shouldn't probably say a man, should I? A person on site is got a pneumatic drill, and for whatever reason, they're about to put the pneumatic drill over their foot. And that's going to be a real problem for everyone, isn't it? The poor man's going to have a very sore foot, but also for his employer. Indeed, an ambulance will have to be called. It's all going to probably shut down the site. It's all a real pain. So if you're thinking about innovation, what is the solution to that problem that means it will never happen? And one option might be to put a robot on site and get rid of the person. Because then clearly the pneumatic drill would just drill over the robot, but the robot wouldn't hurt a foot. Or maybe you could put a sensor on the pneumatic drill which says, don't go near human feet, which technically might be possible. Or you might just want a better boot, which means that when the pneumatic drill goes near the boot, it kicks off again and doesn't cut. Does that make sense? So a lot of investors would be super excited about the robot, but that's probably some years away. And some investors would be super excited about the sensor. But I think there might be a lot of money to be made out of not just those, but also the tougher boot.
Oh, cool.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
I think the investors I know, and I think there's a rather large number of investors who are actually, when you talk about that, they also get quite interested because they go, that's a good point, actually. It's not without the excitement of a new business. It's not without risk, all the things that make people invest because they like all that stuff. But it might just be a quicker route to lots of revenue and profits, and might be very good profits.
And I think that is a great example of how to tell a story to connect entrepreneurs to investors, because it's certainly in my experience, it's always the hardest part of trying to grow your business. And I guess you're launching a new AI-enabled initiative to support startups to scale their innovation. So it's a great example. So, what role do you see the supply chain, British Water members in helping to solve these future challenges in the water sector? And most importantly, where are the biggest gaps you're trying to address? Because this is great listening to you because you've got very little experience in the water sector. So it's great to get your perspective because otherwise we talk to ourselves too much.
So I think one of the most important things I always say with anything in business is the first point is always the commercial priorities. So if you align yourself with the commercial priorities of your customers, which may include increasing profits or reducing risk or having less, might even be, there might be value in having better impact. So there's lots and lots of different factors that cause people to trade with you as an entrepreneur, and understanding the reality of that rather than the fantasy. I think so often people invent products that don't necessarily have a customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean the boot example. By the way, I must admit the boot example, that was a story that was originally told to me. I won't name the person, but I should acknowledge that it wasn't totally my original idea of how to tell that story. But all the best entrepreneurs lean on other people being clever. So going back to this issue about, so I think for water entrepreneurs, you definitely have amazing opportunity. I think there's opportunity to make the industry work better. I mean, as somebody who's been outside it, I read headlines and I'm not even going to go there on, it's a bit like watching a telly program where you don't really understand, a doctor program, you don't actually understand about it. I'm not going to try and opine on that. But I believe you in your industry will know where the problems are. But it's about being very honest with yourself about the reality of what the solution to that problem is, the workable solution for the customer, not just the fantasy that says, because I'm marvelous and I've invented something, it must be true. And I think, I don't know whether that's been your experience of when I say this sort of thing, whether it resonates with you, but that's, I think, the single biggest issue is the product market fit issue, which is, do people actually want it? And will they pay the price you can sell it at that makes you a profit?
Yeah.
Another issue as well.
I think that's a great perspective. We often think about inventing a great product or idea because it does what it says. It's great, and engineers are always going to engineer, Modwenna. But actually connecting that to a market is a real skill. And I'm sure what you just described there is actually would really unlock a lot of opportunities. And I guess the next part of the opportunity is finance. It's often, it can be quite a bottleneck. There's lots of great people with ideas and innovation, but not always the capital to scale. Have you got any advice, sage words of wisdom around how we can maybe leverage a better mix of funding sources and improve collaboration between investors and supply chain and help really get into really making that transformational innovation?
Yeah, and that is one of the most complicated questions you could possibly ask, though you probably want a simple answer. So I'll try and answer it in a few steps. First thing is, not all investors are the same, and that's a mistake people make. The other thing is, a lot of people don't understand that investors have their own wave of activity, interest, etc. So some of them, if you're working for a VC firm trying to source deals, that's taking up a lot of your time each week. If you're an angel investor, it might be that your angel investing is only 5% of your time each week. So understanding that different investors have different timelines and profiles, and that's in any one week, let alone over 5-10 years. So first of all, understanding where the investors are in their cycle, what their priorities are, is one of the first steps to understanding what you want to do. The next step is different investors invest different types of money. So not always, because there's always something who breaks the rules, which is always very irritating, but angel investors who are the real people who are a bit like the people on Dragon's Den. I'm sure your readers would have and viewers will have watched Dragon's Den. That is, by the way, that's a bit like Dad's Army to the real army.
It's one of my favourites in Slessor Towers, Modwenna. We do like it.
Yeah, exactly. So angel investors tend to they like to be able to sort of add value and help as well as the money. So, and they tend to therefore invest early. They also like to buy big stakes in companies, not because they're greedy, but because it's likely that lots more people will invest later. So their shareholding will get smaller over time as more and more people invest. So if they're actually going to make money because they invest so early, they need to start with quite a big stake so that they can cope with this dilution issue. This is something I think often people don't really get. And then what happens is, after angels, you tend to get early stage VCs, then later stage VCs, and then off we go. And there's an emerging opportunity in the UK, which is already stronger elsewhere, which is this idea of corporate venture capital. Is that a phrase you're familiar with?
It's a new one on me.
Okay, let me explain. So if you look at the best companies in the world, I guess, let's see, the most strongly performing, the Magnificent Seven in America, just as an example, one of the things you'll see is that every single one of them has a really big activity in M&A, R&D themselves, but also in what's called corporate venture investing. So what they do is, as a corporate, they invest in innovative companies in their sector or near their sector. So this is a really interesting point that isn't talked about enough, that there's these corporates who can be the most amazing investors on the planet because they really get it. They understand product market fit. They can help with all the sorts of things that little companies struggle with, it, which is, getting into the market, and they can provide capital. And if they do it, the evidence suggests they will be a better company because of it as well. So I think that's really exciting.
So the way you've just described it there are examples of that in the water sector, I guess, but I would say certainly more in Europe or in America, there's, I know several of examples that would do that. But I want to drill down on just a quick thing really about what you picked up there, just drawn on your experience with like angel investors, institutional investors. What differentiates a startup in the water sector that actually attracts funding from, one that struggles? You talked there about the different investment cycles and the different investment needs and time and value.
So I think what should attract investors, I mean, I would be interested to know whether you feel there's enough investment going on at the moment in the water sector, because my guess would be there's a lot of people out there feeling that they're not getting the attention they deserve from investors. Is that fair?
I think it is fair, and I think we see a lot of early stage technology that's very promising. We get stuck in something which I would describe as pilot purgatory, where if you're familiar with Dante's Inferno and the steps to hell, there's several businesses that have got great products that struggle to get out of that because of the sort of risk averse nature of regulation in not just in the UK but globally, and so. Trying to do that at the same time as trying to scale and try to connect, absolutely recognise that.
So I'm going to say, what I would hope, I'm beginning to see it's happening. I was talking to someone the other day who said all the people who used to invest in software are now investing in software inside a bit of hardware. Does that make sense? So I am anticipating that there will be a shift, whilst there's also this sort of massive tilt towards AI, which is absorbing so much time and attention and money right now for very interesting reasons. That's a whole, essay in itself, if not PhD. But I think there's also, with that comes a counterbalance almost, where people start saying, hang on a minute, what's happening in the real world? And I think that's going to lead to a greater degree of understanding about the people who actually make things being able to make money. Because other stuff I do is I value companies. I have a business called Athla Valuations, which is not on my LinkedIn, but I'm now telling you all. I mainly work with lawyers who send me companies that need valuing, which is why I don't particularly publicize it on LinkedIn, because I don't, it's not so relevant for most audiences, but for this one it might be. What's interesting about that business is I see every type of business under the sun, because it's not just these super high investable businesses. And what's so exciting about what I do is that I see hundreds of amazing British manufacturing companies making things, not just the sort of funky software AI. I see those too, and honestly, the people I meet, the sheer quality of everything, for me, I find really exciting. You can tell by my energy. I just think it's great. I can hardly tie and do up a nut on a screw. Don't even let me do DIY at home. But I really admire the people who can. And I would like to help them succeed commercially.
I mean, I'm very privileged. When most of our business are manufacturing businesses in RSE, and so I get to see that every day. And like you, I can tell you what I know about engineering in the back of a stamp to a large extent. And so it's great to see that. And I think it's an often undersold part of the UK story about we do actually have a really good, strong manufacturing community here in the UK. And I think it's important, And I guess you'll have worked closely with both investors, early stage entrepreneurs. Give me one single piece of advice, which you could give that would help better understand and collaborate with other people in this sector.
Money isn't free. Money costs money. That would be my one bit of advice. I think that it's so interesting when you talk to entrepreneurs. They tend to have a view that they have a sort of, I hope this isn't too controversial. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are encouraged to believe they have a God-given right to have everything given to them. And that's great. I mean, they're welcome to, but I think a landed entrepreneur who's going to last the course, and we're talking about this issue of resilience. It's going to go up, down, well, badly, 6 steps forward, 5 back, 1 forward. You need resilience, but also you need to be able to be on top of the other issue. Yeah. So if you can't do that and understand that money costs money, so if you're going to raise money, it will cost you money to get that money.
Yeah.
Just like it would cost you to buy some lead or buy a phone contract. And if you understand that, you can then value the effort you put into raising the money, because sometimes you might say, well, I don't have any cash to pay to get the money, so I'm going to have to use my own shoe leather.
Yep.
But if you've got more money, you may say, well, I might be prepared to pay to help, but clearly you should only get paid to help if you've properly done your due diligence on the person who's going to help you. So I do not believe you should just pay money to get money. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you should understand that it costs money to get money. And I think that is probably the single best bit of advice I could give people who are fundraising.
Just that's a great insight, Modwenna, especially for a lot of founders, which are great technical people, but sometimes lack the hard skills around driving growth in their business and moving it on. And so I think that's a great bit of insight. So thanks for sharing that with us.
May I add one more insight as well, just because I think it's quite important too, which is put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand what the investor wants. And many investors have timelines when they want to make their money by. Many investors have objectives, like if they're a fund manager, they need the fund overall to make the amazing amounts of money. Yeah. And they have many companies in the fund. So if you're in a fund, you have to be the best performing company in the fund, not just in the fund. If you're in the fund, you may not be that exciting.
Yeah.
Angels may feel very differently. They may really be passionate about helping you get your business to be incredible. Corporates may say, yeah, we'd like to make money out of the investment, but there's a whole lot more to make by the commercial relationships we have with you.
I think it's definitely a missed opportunity in the UK water sector, and actually globally. I mean, I see things from a bigger perspective, I guess, but the lack of angel investing in water, again, we probably need to figure out a better story to help connect those two communities together.
Well, I'd be delighted to put the word out if that's would help you.
Well, do you know, I speak to so many early stage founders that have got great ideas, great concepts, great challenges that we face to overcome. And the biggest challenge I see is just me finding the right investor is so important, not just for the here and now, but the long term part of the business. But do you know what? I'm going to change tact a little bit now, Modwenna, if you wouldn't mind, and I'm going to dig out my internet research and talk about a recent Deutsche Bank report, which looks at water scarcity as not just a physical financial risk, but actually are all around about economic performance and the health of ecosystems and services. So I guess from an investor's perspective, are investors really taking this seriously enough? Is this a boardroom priority? I guess in a way, do you see this increase in recognition to drive more investors into the sector as people come to terms with that strategic risk, or do you think it's just head in the sand?
So I've been on the board of various companies, not recently. I haven't done much board work because I've been busy doing my latest adventure. But I've never heard it come up in a board meeting, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think one of the problems is the whole this ESG. I also hear about the whole SASB. There's so much discussion about these issues. We know that if we don't make sure the world works from a functional perspective, that everything collapses, but it's often not something, because we've come to assume that the water will just pour out of the tap. I can give you an analogy in the energy sector, which is, and again, I'll be wrong, so please, people can shout out and say, no, this is the correct information, Modwenna. But I understand parts of London now, the grid is full capacity. That means they can't build any more houses.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter how many houses are needed. They literally can't, because they won't have any electricity to turn the lights on. I assume there's the same risks in water.
Cambridge is a case in point where there's large amounts of housing unable to be built because of a lack of clean potable water.
Exactly. So these sorts of issues, which seem to be other people's problems, are issues that when you diligence things, we're going to have to start making sure we're on top of the issue. And I think investors will have to take it more and more seriously. And it won't just be even in sectors. I mean, AI is a classic thing of data centers, but how do you call them?
Yeah.
Are you using a water-based system? In which case, I remember, I can tell you a funny story about water shortage, actually. My grandparents, when I was a little girl, had a house in Andorra. And they lived up in the, I don't know, Andorra's a little tiny state between
Yep.
France and Spain. And they had this holiday house, and it was right up in the mountains. And all round their house were tobacco fields, which of course it's very arid up there. And they would go wild because they'd turn on the tap, no water came out because the farmer had diverted the thing in order to spray his tobacco crops.
Yeah.
And it was quite hard to argue. So, in a sort of in a real world situation, going up to a big burly farmer saying,
Yeah.
"Can I have my water back, please?"
I can imagine their Andorran was perhaps not what it should be as well for those kind of conversations, Modwenna. Yeah, but it's a great point, and I guess moving that on is what would actually unlock that long-term private capital then in the sector and increase that appetite for investing in water. And
I mean,
what do we need to do to build investor confidence?
So we need the key stakeholders in the water industry to come forward and show that they understand the opportunity by demonstrating that they will invest. I'm going to be shameless about that. I would love to have the opportunity to talk to senior people in the water industry and say, guys, you can make a difference by being the people who step forward. Others will follow you because you know what you're doing. So that would be my. Is that too outrageous to ask that?
No.
But that being said, after that's happened, and actually that won't happen if this second rule isn't true, we have to show that people can make money, because investing is about making money. And again, that's another thing I think people get a bit distorted in their views. It's often high risk. I would like to make it lower risk, but those industry leaders stepping forward would help de-risk in so many different ways. So that would be my parts 1 and 2.
Sage wisdom. And I guess, how do you see that investment landscape in water evolving over the next sort of 10 years or so? I guess, for instance, we're seeing like the emergence of like water-focused investment firms, so there's like Burnt Island Ventures, XPV, potential new asset classes with the Rapid program and DPC. I guess, what's the signal, in terms of the direction the sector's headed, and how do you think, how water is being valued in that?
I think the signal is, I mean, it's very exciting to know that people are finding routes to solutions to invest.
Yeah.
But what we need to do is create a cohesive ecosystem that means that the investment at all the different stages can work together and integrate. So we've got, I always cite actually Scotland, the nation of Scotland, because it's one of the most integrated investment ecosystems in the world. Honestly, the people who've been doing it should win prizes, global prizes. There's a proper coordination amongst the investment community, actually thinking about how it works. They don't. It's professional. It's not about having to be best buddies. It's about having a professional, coordinated industry, which allows things to happen, things to develop, things to grow. So that is one of the single biggest issues of how you do that and build that environment.
That's very heartening to hear, as a very proud Scot myself. Modwenna. And I guess so again, this is something that I'm really passionate about at the moment, because I think these things are interlinked in terms of bringing the next generation of talent into water, and actually the next generation of entrepreneurs that will come out of this. And for me, what do you think makes the sector an appealing or sometimes perhaps overlooked place to work for those people?
I think it's essential to life. So there's always going to be business. I mean, it's that simple. It's we often, and so actually when I do valuations, it's funny because I'm always looking for a company that's better than mine. Did find one the other day that was doing very well indeed, which is very exciting, because what can I learn from that company? But I think in terms of water, we need to desperately need to encourage these entrepreneurs. We need to accept that we need to be allowed to accept failure. That's something which America really understands. There's still far too much criticism. There's a sort of, there is only one way. There's only one way to do it, is to be like massively successful and become a billionaire, and then you're God, and anyone else isn't God. It's like, well, that's crazy because there's lots and lots of routes to success, and that route might be intergenerational. You might be doing something that's going to have impact for 50, 100, 200 years, not be selling out in 2 years' time.
Yeah,
and we need to celebrate all that, and we need to help those people, and we need to say that's brilliant if you're doing it that way too. That's just as good as the 2-year billionaire exit.
And I sometimes think we get wrapped up in that a little bit, and so. What advice would you give to someone, considering career water, or, what advice would you give to financial professionals considering the water sector?
I would say understand the regulatory environment.
Yep.
And I would say get very close to these leaders in water who understand their industry best and understand what's coming, what's going to go wrong. So often we see, particularly early stage investors, they again probably get shouts and screams of annoyance from people when I say this. They're more obliged to gamble than invest.
Yeah.
If we can help move that dial away from I'll do it because I sort of emotionally connect and want to just have some fun, into a world where people actually can make an investment. I'm sure you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you mean by that, and I guess it follows on actually nicely to my next question is, I guess, what kind of cultural leadership style encourages that innovation and entrepreneurship and helps keep people engaged?
That's a really good question. So I'm a girl. So I'm not sure I'd answer it the same way as
That's okay.
Somebody else would. So I think, what have I learned over the last 20, 30 years? You have to maintain the love and passion. If you can't do that, you're nowhere. It's become cynical and hardened and stuff. And all the great entrepreneurs I know are actually much more motivated by the love and passion than the making money bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great when you make a lot of money too, but all of them you talk to, and often if they sell out, they're bereft because they're sort of, and people don't use the analogy of a baby. I mean, I'm a bit uncomfy because that's probably not cool, but it is that thing of you've built this thing out of nothing, and it's been shaped by you and formed by you and your co-founders. So maintaining the passion, but also I think if there's only one thing, it's resilience. It's and being humble, being prepared to recognize you're wrong, admit it, recognize other people are real human beings who have intelligence and value to add. Another thing people sometimes forget, both up, down, and sideways. Stick with your family, because your company won't be there when at your graveside, but your family will. Look after your family.
All exceptional words of wisdom, and thanks for sharing them with us, Modwenna. Nothing I absolutely disagree with there. So we're coming to the end, so I'm going to start wrapping up. So final question, I guess, for me is, what's the most overlooked investment opportunity in UK water sector? Where I'm very good at looking inside, so I'm looking for somebody with an outside perspective here.
Right, that's quite a challenge because I'm not very interested in. I mean, I'm not very experienced in your. I am interested. I'm not experienced in your.
But that's a great place to be, Modwenna, because you'll see things from a different perspective.
So, what's my biggest concern? I think my biggest.
Sorry, well, let me rephrase that. What's the most overlooked investment opportunity in UK water?
I'm just genuinely pipes, maybe making sure the leakage doesn't come through.
Yeah.
Is that an art? You can now say no, Modwenna, you've missed the point entirely. But I would say how do we make sure that every special, very precious bit of this amazing liquid is in the right place at the right time and not going to the wrong place at the wrong time?
I think sewers, water mains are often overlooked by some of the more sexier process stuff and big digital stuff, and leakages. We've made great strides in leakage in the UK, but there's still more to do. And so it's interesting to see people's perspective, because when you work in water all the time, you sort of have a different view because you're talking about it all the time, and so actually listening to what people perceive to be the issues is really useful, and actually see how that can transcend. And
I can almost see that if you did a big press release saying I've got the solution to all water leakage, and did a clever video, I can't imagine how many people would come and try and invest in it. because it's
Exactly.
such a topic. I mean, you've got the
Yeah.
you've got the PR behind you. So in terms of publicity, you would get so much free PR with your
Yeah.
solution. But first as a tiny little technical something or other, or something to do with billing, which I can see how billing also helps. But you
Yeah.
know, actually, you'd God, I might have to go and invent something now.
So I'm going to give you the final word. Is there anything that we haven't talked about you think, wow, I should have said this, or I really need to get this off my chest and you've not asked me?
I would love to. I often talk now, and I mean this, earn my chance to be friends with people in the water industry. So if anyone can educate me, please send me reports, information, anything that means that if you were to ask me these questions in a year's time, I would give you hopefully even better quality answers.
Well, to be honest, Modwenna, I've really, really thoroughly enjoyed listening to you today, because it's not often I get a chance to speak in this forum of people outside or just coming into the sector, especially ones from the investment community, because it does give a real different slant on things. And there are so many people I speak to who are desperately seeking VC style, serious early investors in this space. And I think you're going to have a very busy and exciting few years ahead of you, Modwenna, as you sort of start getting into this a little bit more.
Thank you very much. Well, it's so kind of you to give me the opportunity. I
Not
hope,
at all.
hope this is the start of a. I should be use puns like a rush, shouldn't I?
I look forward to hearing from you again in the future, Modwenna. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Have a great day. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.